She, to me, is the epitome of a focused life. I call her the 20th century St. Francis of Assisi.
And she's a modern day heroine. She didn't live in the past. She's a woman who lived the path completely.
And she just had perfect protection all those years. A woman walking through the desert at night or through the slums of cities, a woman.
I thought she was a kook. She was gone. I mean, I thought there was something really wrong with this woman.
I would have been a disciple, but she made it very clear that she did not want any followers.
There was no sham, no pretense. There's nothing false about her. That's so rare these days.
Everything about her really, I think, was unique. I never knew anybody else like that.
This person must be some kind of a nut.
You see, there was this simplicity about her. Rare, rare, rare person.
She would be the type of person you would like to be when you grew up.
She is the singular person that I have known who found that kingdom within, who lived in a different dimension.
The power of a life like that is incredible.
I am a pilgrim, a wanderer. And a pilgrim is a wanderer with a purpose. My pilgrimage is for peace. Peace among nations, peace among groups, peace with our environment, but also peace among individuals, and the very, very important inner peace, which is what I talk about the most.
She spoke of universal spirituality before spirituality was in vogue.
Aren't they beautiful? I touch God many times as truth. All that intellectually, and emotionally I touch God as love and goodness and kindness and beauty. I felt God through the beauty of a sunrise or a sunset. And then reaching out through an awakened divine nature, I was able to perceive God as the ever-present, all-pervading essence or spirit, which binds everything in the universe together and gives life to everything in the universe.
She took a vow to walk penniless until mankind had learned peace.
This is a real pilgrimage. It's actually a journey on foot. I don't hitchhike. I walk in spite of all the rides that are offered, and on faith. I took a vow at the beginning that I would remain a wanderer until mankind has learned the way of peace, walking until I am given shelter, and fasting until I am given food. And although I have never asked for anything, I can truthfully say that I have been supplied.
She called herself Peace Pilgrim.
Pray for God's gentle peace within. May the pilgrimage now begin. Peace of mind within our hearts. All who love God walk in peace. Come, let us walk in the way of our God. Let us walk in the way of our God.
It began January 1st of 1953 It's my retirement project, and I finished counting the 25,000 miles toward the end of 1964. I have not counted miles since then.
Well, is it very often that you have to go without food or without a bed on these walks?
I seldom skip more than 3 or 4 meals in a row. I don't even think about food until food is offered. I once had a 45-day period of prayer and fasting. I know how long one can go without food. And even when I'm with total strangers, I have a bed about 3/4 of the time. When I don't, I might sleep in a bus station in a city or a truck stop out on the highway. But I have slept on the grass beside the road. I have walked all night to keep warm. If you're concerned enough about what you're doing, you don't mind any of these little so-called hardships, and I'm very concerned about peace.
She certainly was a peaceful warrior, like Gandhi, like Martin Luther King, like many other people who have a peaceful heart but a warrior spirit.
Her sort of commitment to propagate peace and sort of, I think, the express through one of human action. That's the peace walk. And without any sort of, money or, seeking money or fame or some other thing. Simply carried such hard work, not easy, of course, hard work, sheerly through sincere motivation. It was wonderful.
People became very interested in her as an individual and wrote about it. And this just propelled her message that much stronger into the consciousness of people.
Does anybody who meets you anywhere in your travel think that you're crazy or out of your mind?
They don't say so, but they're very curious, of course. After all, what I work for and pray for, world peace, is the desire of every human heart. They're all very much with me. The fact that I have been completely supplied without ever asking for anything indicates how much they're with me, and of course indicates also how good they are. You know, there's good in every human heart, no matter how deeply it may be buried. If you love them and trust them or have faith in the good in them, you reach it. The world is rather like a mirror. If you smile at it, it smiles at you, and I love to smile.
Someone is peaceful, you don't have to ask them if they're peaceful. You just feel it, and it's like a magnet of you're wanting to be around that person.
That's true.
And I didn't see her as an evangelist trying to change the world in terms of making people do things, but by her own demonstration, she inspired people.
When I realized what human potential really was, what people really are capable of, I looked around me and I said, how sad that most people only scratch the surface of their real potential. No wonder they have problems. No wonder society has problems.
She was very famous in United Nations circles by having these demonstrations of peace, and she was definitely one of the great prophets of peace at that time.
We are now prepared to destroy more rapidly and completely every productive enterprise the Japanese have in any city.
What in our society calls forth a peace pilgrim? Well, don't forget the Korean War was on, the McCarthy era was at its height. There was great fear at that time and therefore great apathy because the safest thing to do is nothing. At any time, in any culture, where there is great apathy in the face of a crisis situation, a pilgrim is apt to step forth. And a pilgrim's job is to rouse people from their apathy and make them think.
Every age provides us with peace pilgrims. They may not walk, they may sing. They may not sing, they may preach. Some poet, some dance.
She said, I shall remain a wanderer till my brothers have learned, my sisters have learned the ways of peace. I shall remain a wanderer till humanity has learned the ways of peace.
There was nothing ascetic in the sense of deprived about her. She didn't go around feeling sorry for herself and feeling like she didn't get to have what other people did. She gloried in the richness of her inner life and the richness of her connections with people, because that's where true richness lives.
Now, a pilgrim walks not only prayerfully, but as an opportunity to contact people.
She called herself Peace Pilgrim. She walked this land for peace.
And that's why I'm wearing my short tunic with Peace Pilgrim on the front and 25,000 miles on foot for peace on the back, because it makes my contacts for me in a very kind way. I don't need to approach people. They approach me. And my message, one sentence: this is the way of peace. Overcome evil with good, and falsehood with truth, and hatred with love. You see, it isn't new, just the practice of it would be new. But I consider it the lesson for today.
Her message is impacted and it's strengthened by the fact that she lived it. You know, to go out and say, I am not going to eat, to have the kind of faith that she had, and say, I'm not going to sleep until somebody gives me a place to sleep. I'm not going to eat until I'm offered some food. I'm just going to teach, if you will, my message of peace, my message of love, and have the faith that all things will be provided.
I took my vow of simplicity. I shall not accept more than I need, while others in the world have less than they need. And that was what motivated me to bring my life down to need level for me. And I realized that the need level of a pilgrim is about rock bottom. Most people would need much more than I need. For instance, if you're called into the family pattern, you would need the stability of a family center for your children. There are needs beyond physical needs. So I'm not telling you your need is the same as mine, but I'm just saying find your need level. When I found my need level, I felt a wonderful harmony in my life. What I want and what I need are exactly the same. You couldn't give me anything I don't need.
she carried a ballpoint pen, and I gave her stamps. And when she only asked me, and I said, oh, I have a lot of stamps. She said, oh, I need 3 stamps. I mean, like, I don't need a dozen stamps. I need 3 stamps. Extra, a 4th stamp would be a burden, you know. Where am I going to put it? It'll get damp in my pocket or something, you know.
How old are you? I no longer know, and I'm so thankful. I had to put out of my mind how old I am, how old I was when I started, and how old I was when I began my preparation for the pilgrimage. And I've done that now. I am ageless and in radiant health. Now let me answer the most common question that I am asked. How in the world did you ever get started on a thing like that? I came from a very quiet life. I was born on a small farm on the outskirts of a small town. I had a woods to play in and a creek to swim in and room to grow. And I would wish for all children a situation where they have room to grow, because I look at plants growing up too crowded together, and I realize that they never attain maximum growth. And we humans are a little like that too. Now, I began to make some good choices when I was still quite young. For instance, my rule of first things first. And the golden rule influenced my life when I was quite young. I read it in history. Do unto others as you would have others do unto you, expressed in a lot of different ways. It was really pointing out that every culture had one. Well, it was different from anything I had ever read, because it received an inner confirmation from me and affected my entire life. I carried it into high school with my little saying, if you want to make friends, you must be friendly. And that's an offshoot of the golden rule, a recognition that people react according to the influences brought to bear upon them. I still have it in my life today with my little saying, if you want to make peace, you must be peaceful. And that works too.
She would never kill anything, not even a mosquito. I can remember we had a lot of them in this area at one time. I can remember her just brushing the mosquitoes off. She wouldn't kill them because she said she wouldn't kill another living thing.
From the first that I knew her, which was of course in high school, she was a dynamic person. She was not only at that time already, she showed promise of being an excellent speaker, but she was devoid of all fear. And she would tell the audience exactly what she thought.
I remember when I was a child, I was offered real cigarettes from a package, which I didn't smoke, but my friends did. In high school, I was offered every kind of alcohol you can think of, which I didn't drink, but my friends did. Now, I faced a test in this regard just beyond my student days. All my friends at that time used both alcohol and tobacco, and with this push toward conformity in those days, they actually looked down on me because I didn't. And gathered in someone's living room, I said to them, look, life is a series of choices. Nobody can stop you from making your choices, but I have a right to make my choices too. And I have chosen freedom. I got the impression that one gets in this materialistic age that the way to get on well in the world was to get out there and make a lot of money and get ahead of the other fellow. And during the early years of my life, I discovered that money making was easy, but not satisfying. Before a life can be in harmony, It must be in harmony with its part in God's plan. You know, every one of us has a unique part in God's plan which we cannot learn from without, which we must learn from within. And therefore, if you do not yet know clearly where you fit into God's plan, seek it in receptive silence.
I heard your voice that called to follow. I felt your love within my heart. I was longing for your presence.
Out of a feeling of deep seeking for a meaningful way of life, I began to walk one night through the woods with the feeling that I would continue to walk until I found what I was seeking. And after I had walked almost all night, I came out into a clearing where the moonlight was shining down. And I found myself saying, if you can use me for anything, please use me. And I found myself feeling, here I am, take all of me, use me as you will, I withhold nothing. And then, of course, I felt I had found what I was seeking. I experienced the complete willingness, without any reservations whatsoever, to give my life to something beyond myself. But then I discovered that there is a great difference between the willingness to give and the actual giving. In my life, 15 years lay between. I experienced what seemed like a struggle between two selves, which the psychologist would call ego and conscience, which the religious person would call self-will and God's will, which I often call in my everyday words the lower self and the higher self. And in the midst of the struggle between these two viewpoints, I caught my first glimpse of the life of harmony, the life of inner peace.
When she first came to the Jane Addams house, she was a discontent person. And when she became Peace Pilgrim, she was happy. She'd found her niche.
I saw in my mind's eye myself walking along and wearing the garb of my mission. I just needed to duplicate it. I saw in my mind's eye a map of the United States with the large cities marked in, and it looked as though someone had taken a colored crayon and marked a route across from Los Angeles to New York City, coast to coast and border to border, which was my first pilgrimage route.
course, a pilgrim walks on faith. I have no money. I don't accept any money. I belong to no organization. There is no organizational backing behind me. And I own only what I wear and just the few things I carry in my little pockets. I just walk until given shelter, fast until given food. I don't even ask. It's given without asking. Aren't people good?
You walk this country of ours without so much as a penny in your pocket. You just walk on faith alone, faith that somebody will take care of you, and it always seems to happen. You must have some intuition as to who to approach and who to smile to and who is going to be good to you, though, don't you?
I smile to everyone. I never approach anyone. And those who come are very special. They're either genuinely interested in peace or they have a good, lively curiosity.
I think I first heard about Peace Pilgrim over television. I think she was being interviewed.
I worked at a Howard Johnson's restaurant waitressing in Plattsburgh, New York. So when Peace Pilgrim came, it just happened that she got sad at one of my stations. She just had this beautiful, placid look in her eyes. I still get teary thinking about this, because it means a lot to me.
I noticed this person walking down the road, that she was going the opposite direction that I was. And I said I never picked up hitchhikers. Something intuitively within me drove me to do this. And I remember so vividly reaching across the car door and opening the door for peace. And very spontaneously I said, I think you have something that I want.
Peace Pilgrim, you know, there are a certain number of people who would not even think of doing this, that would probably think of somebody like yourself as a kook or a nut.
The question I had before I met her was, this person must be some kind of a nut.
Who would want to go around dressed like that?
When you're praying for a guru, you're praying for a teacher, and then all of a sudden you come confronted with an old lady with tennis shoes, you know, with an old battered tunic saying, Peace Pilgrim, speaking in a squeaky voice and hanging around with all these old people. And I just felt that this wasn't going to work out. That was my first impression, that it really wasn't going to work out, that I blew it again.
My driver, the representative, he thought she was just an ordinary person, and he completely dismissed her as being of non-importance.
Heard the stories of the kingdom, the hidden treasures you have shown. I'll give it all for what I found here. I'm after you and you alone.
There was an announcement that we were going to have a speaker, a woman that spoke about peace, and she wore a blue tunic, and she called herself the Peace Pilgrim. And I remember hearing that description and thinking, she sure sounds flaky to me. But I did go to hear her, and within a few moments, or a few minutes of hearing her speak, I saw she was not flaky. She was very down-to-earth, very present, and very level-headed.
But I very quickly realized she was anything but a nut. She seemed just as normal as anybody could seem.
We spent 10 hours at the railroad station talking, one-on-one. Me and her. I went in with skeptical. I bombarded her with questions. I never let up. And at the end of the 10 hours, my doubts were allayed. I felt that I don't have to go any further. This is it. This is what I've been looking for.
Well, I'm quite sure that some of those who have just heard of me must think I'm completely off the beam. After all, I am doing something different, and pioneers have always been looked upon as being a bit strange. But you see, I love people, and I see the good in them, and you're apt to reach what you see.
I just liked her essence right away. She was almost like a stand-up person, although she was seated. And I mean, when you go in a room, if there's one person standing and everybody else is seated, you gravitate to that person who's standing. Well, she was outstanding, let's put it that way, while she was seated.
I said, this is a mystic. And I didn't know what a mystic was, but I said, that is a mystic.
She just exuded health. The energy was there, but she was just healthy. And the expression on her face and in her eyes, that there was, she certainly had achieved the peace. I find it really difficult to describe what I saw, because what I saw went a lot beyond physical.
One of the most difficult things to do with peace was to give her something. And I had to trick her. And when she would come to see me, we'd have an argument. Peace, you need new shoes. No, they'll last a little bit longer. Peace, you need new shoes. Those are terrible. They're going to fall off your feet. No, well, we can wait. And I'd be sneaky. I'd go into a mall. Drive and say, hey, Ma, come with me, Peace. Where are you going? I'm going over here from home. Go right up to the place where she has to buy the shoes. And I said, Peace, there's your shoes.
I offered her the apple, and she said, are you trying to spoil my connections? It's about like that. And I said, well, no, I just thought you'd like to have an apple. She said, I'll be fed. Went off down the road.
I started what I have come to call a spiritual growing up or a psychological growing up. It takes you from the self-centered life, or the life governed by the self-centered nature, into the life governed by the nature which is centered in the good of the whole, which sees you as a part of the whole and works for the good of the whole, which sees that you're a cell in the body of humanity, that every cell, every human being has, well, equal importance, equal potential, although in varied stages of growth, because we choose how much growing we do, and a job to do in the total scheme of things. That was my preparation for the pilgrimage. It took 15 years.
She called herself Peace Pilgrim. She walked this land for peace. Over 25,000 miles she walked alone, with no possessions but the clothes upon her back. No money in her pocket, yet nothing did she lack. Nothing did she lack.
Will there be peace or war?
The fateful question posed by Warren Austin, head of the United States delegation to the UN, set the mood of the world at the century's halfway mark. A highly trained and well-equipped North Korean army swarmed across the 38th parallel to attack unprepared South Korean defenders.
I have walked 6,900 miles of my 10,000-mile pilgrimage for peace. My first 5,000 miles took me from coast to coast and from border to border. My second 5,000 miles is taking me at least 100 miles in every state, Mexico, and Canada, always ending at the capital.
The cost was high to Americans who bore the brunt under the UN banner.
Now, is it true that the House Committee on Un-American Activities is considering an investigation of the clergy?
The investigation of communism and communists in this country should take place wherever it be found.
Increased range guided missiles were added to the underseas arsenal, and the submarine became a more formidable weapon of counterattack on enemy coasts. The year had indeed seen a revolutionary step forward in naval warfare and the nation's defense.
Uneasy peace, but peace with all, came to Korea in 1953. The end of 3 years of bitter conflict and the end of bondage for prisoners of the Reds.
Where are you from originally, or is that being kept a secret?
Well, I was born in the state of New Jersey, but of course I have no home now. Wherever I am is my home. Right now it's Mississippi, and they've been treating me very well.
Thanks a lot, and good luck, Peace Pilgrim.
President Eisenhower began his second term as leader, not only of America, but all free peoples. His inauguration address was a peace plea.
May the turbulence of our age yield to the true time of peace, when men and nations shall share a life that honors the dignity of each.
I think no negative thoughts, because the thing that can really destroy you is negative thinking. And so I always think about the best that could happen, all the good things I want to see happen, because those are the things I want to emphasize.
She walked until given shelter, and fasted until given food. Though others may have judged her, she judged no one, looking upon all with a single heart of compassion.
Intense fighting both on the ground, inside the buffer zone, and in the air sends Vietnam casualty figures to a new high.
We've happened to live because of the ingenuity of science. And man's own inability to control his relationship one with another. We happen to live in the most dangerous time in the history of the human race.
I receive these letters. Sometimes it's true, they have written to their congressmen, they have joined the Peace Corps. Sometimes, well, a lady wrote and said, since talking with you, I have resolved an unpeaceful situation between myself and my sister-in-law. And a high school girl wrote and said, since talking with you, I've made peace with my girlfriend.
They land in full battle gear, but meet no opposition from the guerrillas known to be in the area. Others of the 3,500 Marines are to come by air transport. Their duty will be strictly defensive, but they will shoot back if attacked. Marines usually do.
Where do you go from here, Peace Pilgrim, and what is your future?
I'll be in Youngstown over the weekend. Then I'm heading south, Steubenville first, and then southern Ohio. I'm covering the entire East this year. As to my future, my vow says I shall remain a wanderer until mankind has learned the way of peace. That I'm an optimistic peace pilgrim. I expect to see world peace in my lifetime. I believe that peace is an idea whose time has come.
Well, good luck to you
and
your cause.
Thanks.
Mr. Kennedy presented a manifesto for peace in momentous and moving words.
Ladies and gentlemen of this assembly, the decision is ours. Never have the nations of the world
had so much to lose or so much to gain. Together we shall save our planet, or together we shall perish in its flames. Save it we can, and save it we must. And then shall we earn the eternal thanks of mankind, and as peacemakers, the eternal blessing of God.
You know, I started with no previous athletic ability, and I started after my hair had turned to silver. My friends said I had taken leave of my senses, but of course, if walking is your calling, you can walk. And I also have no speaking experience. I had led a very quiet life. I had never seen the inside of a radio or a television station, but I never had stage fright or night fright. If speaking is your calling, you can speak.
We've been walking and talking with a woman who calls herself Peace Pilgrim, who walks across the nation in search of peace and goodwill for men.
Heard the stories of the kingdom, the hidden treasures you saw. I'll give it all for what I found here. I'm after you and you alone. She left behind a legacy of simplicity and love. Every step she took was for this world we're dreaming of. Powered by an inner strength that comes from above, from above.
A companion peace demonstration brings out 50,000 marchers in downtown San Francisco. They parade 2 miles along Market Street, pacifists and hippies together.
You say that you own nothing, you don't worry about tomorrow, you just travel from community to community. Might you agree that you were almost the forerunner of today's hippie?
Well, actually, I suppose the original hippies back about 4 years ago or something like that would have agreed with me on one thing. They also were completely through with violence. They believed, I'm not sure they always practiced, but they believed that actually the way to go was the way of nonviolence and love. And of course, my message says, this is the way of peace. Overcome evil with good, and falsehood with truth, and hatred with love.
It's sort of a happy happening for hippies. You're out if you're not in, a be in, the recurring theme of which is love one another.
The important thing was not to talk about peace, but to get peace, and to get the right kind of peace. This we have done.
I think peace in the world is much closer now. What we basically suffer from in the world is immaturity. If we were mature people, peace would be assured.
Have you had any experiences which made you wonder about people, or do you always get treated hospitably?
Oh, people are good. I have no doubt of that. I have to really think back to my tests if I want to tell you anything that might be considered an adverse experience. And I don't consider it an adverse experience. Life is a series of tests, but if you pass your test, you look back upon it as a good experience. I was hit once in my first test by a disturbed teenage boy who was terrified by a thunder shower. I had taken him for a walk. I thought it would do him good. And he went off the beam when that thunder shower came along, and he came for me And I didn't even try to run away, which I guess I could have done. He had a heavy pack on his back. And even while he began to hit me, I could only feel the deepest compassion for him. How terrible to be so psychologically sick that you would be able to hit an old woman. I faced his hatred with love even while he hit me. And as a result, it reached that spark of good in him. All was there, no matter how deeply buried, and he experienced remorse. And to make a long story short, what are a few bruises on my body in comparison with the transformation of a human life? He never was violent again. He's a useful person in this world today. Now, one more, and that is the time I had to defend the frail little 8-year-old girl against a large man who was about to beat her, and the girl was terrified. Well, I knew her danger because of her fear. You attract what you fear, so I put my body between the man and the girl, and I just stood and looked at that poor, psychologically sick man with loving compassion. He came close. He stopped. He looked at me for quite a while. He turned around, walked away, and the girl was safe. Now, what was the alternative? Suppose I had been so foolish as to attempt to use the jungle law of tooth and claw. I would undoubtedly be dead today, and so would the little girl. Let us never underestimate the great power of the way of love, which reaches that spark of good in the other person, and the person is disarmed.
Following her first steps as Peace Pilgrim, on New Year's Day 1953, Peace crisscrossed the nation 7 times, visiting every state capital and every town with a population over 10,000, as well as many smaller communities and distant byways. After 25,000 miles, she stopped counting, but kept walking, focusing on an increasingly full schedule of speaking appearances in schools, churches, colleges, and on radio and television.
The chaos in the world around us is a reflection of the inharmony within us. In the final analysis, only as we become more peaceful people will we find ourselves living in a more peaceful world.
She was so true to her beliefs. She never deviated from them, as far as I can see. I mean, she was so true. She didn't, like we'd go on a diet, but we'll cheat a little bit or something. She never strayed from her principles and her beliefs.
If you really believe a thing, you do the thing. Not what you say you believe. There is the Confucian saying that to know and not to do is in fact not to know. A number of people say they know this and they know that and they want this or they want that. They don't really know. You see, if a person really knew that what goes around comes around, they wouldn't commit evil acts. If they knew it, they say it, they intellectually have embraced it, but to know it means you know it in your bones, you know it. The marrow of your bones is imprinted with that knowledge. You can't do otherwise when you know it. So Peace Pilgrim knew it, and so she did it.
I first heard of Peace Pilgrim in 1957 when she was walking through Canada. She was walking 100 miles in every province.
They stopped her at the border going into Canada and weren't going to let her in because she didn't have any money. And so she said, but what would happen if I were Jesus? And the man said, well, of course, we have these regulations, you know how they are. And her sister sent her some money, and then when she got across the border, she sent the money back to her sister. We had a lot of fun with her. Peace Pilgrim said she doesn't carry a penny in her pockets, and so our daughter, to play a trick on her, put a penny in her tunic pocket.
What impressed me was her inner peace, not her great knowledge of science, Many people say I love seeking the searching, but she said I found. Now that's very unusual. I never run across a person before that said I have found inner peace.
I was very unhappy at her because I wanted her to stay longer. She was just there for a day and a night, and I thought, here she was a pilgrim, free as the wind, and of course she could stay longer, but she had speaking engagements arranged across Canada.
She gave a talk at St. John's College here in Santa Fe, and I did a story for the newspaper. And though I was there as a reporter, I also was intrigued by her life. The fact that she wasn't just talking about peace, but the fact that she was living what she was talking about. Her lifestyle fascinated me, as I think it did a lot of people.
I don't care whether it was a churlish type of a question that came from the audience or something that was aimed at demeaning what she was. She was absolutely in control, and she was expressing herself in the most simplistic way that she could. She was direct. Her message was direct. It was a singular message.
It was an interesting time that I discovered her because it was during the Cold War, and there was this real conflict between the United States and the Soviet Union, and there was a real threat of nuclear war, and which would have totally destroyed the whole world, everything living on it. And here was this woman, this individual, that had the courage to say, no, I am going to promote peace. Never mind what other people are doing. Never mind what the Soviet Union, how it's threatening us or how we're threatening the Soviet Union with all of those missiles pointed at each other. And here was this woman that was walking her talk. I mean, literally walking her talk and walking across the United States promoting peace. And the thing that really was so wonderful about her was that she knew that peace started within us and that it was an individual happening, that it had to happen with individuals, one by one by one. And it was so inspiring to me that it certainly changed my consciousness, my awareness, and the direction that I was thinking, and certainly changed activity of mine also. So she was very influential and inspirational in my life at that time.
The basic conflict in our world today is not between nations. It is between two opposing beliefs. The belief that you can overcome evil with more evil. And of course, those people are busy multiplying the evil. Now, this is the official position of every major nation in the world. This is the war way. And the belief, which is my way, and I'm sure it's your way, I'm sure many people relate to this, the belief that evil can only be overcome by good.
I was timid about calling people, and I was timid. I thought, oh, I don't know who to call. And I would tell her, and she'd say, oh, mignon, you know, oh, dear. And then she would just go to the telephone and start dialing and looking in the book, and pretty soon she'd have everything full. She would just say, this is Peace Pilgrim. I'm walking for 25,000 miles for peace, and I would like to have an opportunity to speak on your radio. Well, I'd say, okay. Who wouldn't if you were walking 25,000 miles for peace?
She talked to various churches on the telephone and introduced herself, and she'd made 7 different appointments to put on an appearance in 7 different Anchorage churches. And so in anticipation of our first meeting, we put Peace in the car. And we have a one hectic time running her with minutes to spare from this meeting to that meeting. And Peace was not at ease. And either were, it wasn't a peaceful time for any of us.
She started by giving a brief talk describing what she was doing and why she was doing it. And then rather quickly, she tried to engage the class in discussion. They were trying to challenge her, and she enjoyed it. I mean, if there was a real challenge in what they were saying, she responded to it with sort of a glee. So there was sort of a happy, excited give and take with the students. I think they all felt she's a little strange, but they liked her. I'm sure they liked her. You couldn't help but liking her.
Peace Pilgrim had the abilities of a stand-up comedian in how she would handle hecklers or challengers. She knew how to disarm people. Sometimes people would make assumptions about her. They would say, okay, this is a person involved in the peace movement. Here's how I can get their goat. Here's where they're going to have a rigid position. And then Peace Pilgrim would turn out not to have as rigid a position, a rigid a stance on things as they imagined.
It was like she had never talked about these things before, and that we were being graced with these inner words that were just coming from her very spontaneously.
I asked her about it. I said, you know, this is the third one I've heard, Peace, and you just did them all exactly right. Exactly the same. You didn't miss a... She said it was given to me. She said that she was walking, and she didn't know how to speak in public, and she was walking, and the whole thing was given to her. And she said, I've just never changed it.
One of the things we're just coming to realize is that we create through thought. We constantly create through thought. We create our inner conditions. We hope to create the conditions around us. Now, if you're fearful, what will happen? You will attract the things you fear. I fear nothing and expect only good. So to me, only good comes. But then, of course, I'm always thinking about the best that could happen and all the good things that I want to see happen, because those are the things I want to emphasize.
She recognized everything as an energy expression. She was so enchanting in talking about the energy that is manifesting into this tree, this flower, this growing expression, whatever it might be. She had this tremendous awareness of anything that grew, and she loved flowers. She not only saw the beauty, she would cup her hands, she never would pick a flower, she'd cup her hands around it to study the flower and appreciate the beauty of it. But she also was seeing that unique quality of energy that was manifesting into this flower. That life spark that has energized into this particular product, just as we are.
We all met in Seattle, Washington, at the airport. And people flew from all over the country, as I knew they were going to. And now this was to be an inspirational and educational tour of Alaska.
It's just a beautiful retreat situation. We're together for a couple of weeks amid beautiful surroundings, and everybody comes back inspired and uplifted, everyone ready to work for their good cause.
We got to Alaska, and we realized that she really hadn't planned this trip out at all. She was taking us on a sightseeing tour. My husband, Andy, and I kept saying, well, Peace, you know, this is great, you know, it's beautiful and everything, but, you know, we want to hear you talk more. And she said, oh, you would like me to talk more to the group? And we said, yes. And so she said, well, okay. How about we'll get together as a group in the morning and in the evening? So we said, well, that's great. And then we also started, we drew names so that everyone had an opportunity to spend an hour alone walking with her, which was great because we all got to address the areas, that we were interested in.
I was always asking her questions, whatever would fly through my head. I was like a little kid, just wanting to know what her opinion was on whatever it is.
He said to her one day, well, Peace, why do we have to buy our food? Why can't we live on faith like you do? I mean, we came on this trip to experience the way you live. You don't go out and buy your food. We want to live on faith like you do. And she would, try to explain, well, now, Andy, there's a big difference here. We're traveling with 18 people and, there's this and that. And he wouldn't let up. Now, Peace, this was an experience of living the way you do. Now, I don't see why we can't live on faith. And so after going back and forth with him several times, she finally looked at him and she said, Andy, if you want to walk on faith, you'll have to walk on your own. You can't walk on mine.
She didn't tell us that stinker. But we didn't live on faith on food, but we lived on faith regarding lodging, which means she was winging it by the seat of her pants there too. Some people got aggravated when it was 8 o'clock at night and we still didn't know we were going to sleep. There were times, I remember we went to a campground and there was big signs there, no camping. And he says, we're camping here. And a couple of the people come up and said, Peace, it says no camping here. How could we disobey the law?
And she said, oh, don't worry. We're not camping. We're just going to sleep.
So I remember Andy B. went up to the ranger and said, hey, would it be okay if we stay here tonight? We're 18 people, we're on a peace trip, we're a peace pilgrim, this and that. And he said, no, and he came back and he told Peace that he went up to and she says, what did you do? And
she said, oh, no. She said, don't ask. If you ask, they have to say no. It's their, it's the regulation.
Peace believed in the spirit of the law, not the letter of the law.
There was a big debate between the grumblers, the letter of the laws, who were saying, well, what's the matter with her anyway, thinking that we could camp where we're not supposed to camp. I mean, rules are rules. And then there were those of us who were saying, the spirit of the law, gee, I like that.
I says, you must have secrets. You must have certain things. This just isn't your whole message. And she kept insisting, I don't have secrets. I said, you gotta have secrets. But tell me, what's your secret? I'm looking. Finally, she said, I have a secret, but I would not call it that. There was a time, long ago, when I died, utterly died to myself.
Hawaii trip was organized somewhat differently in that she had learned from the Alaska trip more what the desires of the people with her were, which is to share more of her stories and her insights and her wisdom in some of the more, in a more esoteric sense than her general message.
There's a spot on the island of Kauai. It's called the Fern Grotto. You have to get there by boat along a broad river. And the tour company has someone playing guitar, singing Hawaiian songs. And just spontaneously, Peace Pilgrim got up and started dancing.
And immediately get into all of the hula movements and was just having a great time. She was completely drawn right into it.
This is the first time I saw Peace Pilgrim dance, and her face was filled with delight. She was thoroughly enjoying herself. Peace Pilgrim had a great capacity for fun. The Peace Pilgrim group went over to tour the grounds of the Mormon temple, and before the tour began, they asked us to sign a book with our name and address and asked us what our religion was. So people were fascinated to see what Peace Pilgrim wrote down was her religion. So after everyone got through signing the book, a couple of us dashed back and took a peek, and what Peace Pilgrim had written under "What is your religion?" she wrote, "Universal Truth."
Peace would give her wonderful talk about how all of her needs were answered and she never asked. And that was absolutely true. But she had a way of getting her needs known. And she had said something like, there are some people I would probably like to send postcards to, but of course I don't have any. But she didn't ask.
Part of Cheryl and I's job, with Peace Pilgrim as her helpers would be to wake her up. She was a very deep sleeper. I remember shaking her and shaking her and shaking her. Everybody was touching her. And I says, "Oh, let's get her up." Shook her as hard as I can, and she would wake up.
This night we settled her in this beautiful white sandy cove and went on down the beach. And the next morning came back to wake her up. And as we walked into the area where she was, we were just astounded to see this beautiful yellow flower had sprung up right beside her head where she was sleeping.
There were no other flowers on the beach, and it was a completely sandy beach. There were no... How does something grow in the sand? We said, "Peace, look at that flower there. It grew right by your head."
She was, "Oh, there's a rational explanation for everything." And she just turned and walked away.
We just looked and stared at it. We went out and got a picture of it. I like to think of it as the miracle flower, but if I would say that to Peace, he'd give me a kick in the rear. On the way back from Hawaii, I sat with her. Somehow we got to sit the whole way back, the 5 hours.
And at that time, she was looking at a book that Andy Zupko had written about her, or that was inspired by her. So the last visual impression of Peace Pilgrim is sitting on that airplane next to Andy Zupko, looking through the manuscript of his book. Perhaps a known to us intimation of things to come.
When I started out, people accepted war as a necessary part of life. Now they're looking for alternatives to war, and this is a game. When I started out, there was very little interest in the inner search. Now there's an almost universal interest in the inner search, which to me is the greatest gain of all. Now there is darkness in our world today. It's quite natural. It's due to the disintegration of things which are contrary to the law of love. They cannot endure. They contain within themselves the seeds of their own destruction. So let us look at these things in proper perspective, and we will see that amid the darkness there is also some light. In my frame of reference, I'm not the body. I'm only wearing the body. I'm that which activates the body. That's the reality. Now, if I am killed, it destroys merely the body, which is transient anyway.
What's going to happen when you die? What are they going to do with your body? Oh, don't even talk about that. I says, no, we have to talk about it. I want to talk about it, She says, well, one of two things. They're either going to cremate me They're going to take my body and they're going to cut it up and they're going to use it in a laboratory. Or I don't know what. They'll just bury me in a pauper's grave. Whatever happens, happens. But it's just my body. It's just my outer covering. It's just some old clothes that I'm getting rid of.
And that last night she was here, she did what many people felt was a wonderful healing experience. And many people noticed that she kept looking up during her talk with the people. And finally, she just came down the steps and started moving around through the congregation that was there, and she just would reach out and just touch people and say, bless you, and go to the next, and all. Walked around, there wasn't a sound in the room. And when it was all over, she walked back up and she looked up again and she said, I never say goodbye, but this has been a very special night for me, and I just want to bless all of you, and I'll be seeing you. And many, many people came to me and said, you know, she looked very different, but what was she looking at? The night before that, she and I had sat for a long time and just talked, and she had never talked about death before. Well, neither one of us had. And she said, you know, I want you to join me in prayer. This is really what I want to ask of you tonight, that when my work here on this planet Earth is done, that I move out like that I go very quickly.
There was an explosion. I've never seen anything like that before. It was just like a bomb went off. It was unreal.
I celebrated when she died, the way she died, because she lived in character, and she certainly was a character who did her own thing and believed in it. And she died on the road. She died the way she lived. That was a big blessing. That was a blessing from the heavens.
Felt your love within my heart. I was longing for your presence. I prayed to know who you are. I've heard the stories of the kingdom. kingdom. The hidden treasures you have shown, I'll give it all from what I found here. I'm after you and you alone.
I found her book in the library.
I had a desire to read this book on Peace Pilgrim's life.
I read it right away. Yep, cover to cover.
And I remember not being able to put it down.
This had been such a unique individual with such an inspiring and inspirational story to tell that it really needed to be told.
Somehow the idea emerged, well, let's do a book only in her words.
Peace believed that the truth should never be sold. So there was a preponderance of opinion among the 5 compilers that this book should be made available free to anybody who wanted the book.
And so we devised an experiment in which we had gathered contributions that had been offered for getting a book together. And we decided that we would offer that book free of charge. And whenever we ran out of books and money, that would be the end of our distribution.
We figured we might have 1 printing, maybe 2 printings. But the money kept pouring in, and the money kept pouring in, and we kept reprinting it and reprinting it and reprinting it. And now it's a spiritual classic. Doesn't stop.
Anne and John chose to take this on as their retirement project, and they felt that there was nothing that they could do for the subject of peace that could ever be more important than the distribution of that book.
Okay, 2-hour video. What else do you want? Books? Any books? We're open all the time because this is our home. So anytime, but just don't call in the middle of the night. That's all.
We had 6,000 names from Peace Pilgrim's mailing list, and so we sent out a notice to all those 6,000, letting them know about the book. When the first box of the books came, I was almost afraid to open it because it was just so exciting. It was just so overwhelming to open the box and see Peace Pilgrim walking again down the highway.
Our retirement project has turned out to be our busiest time in our life. I said beyond our expectations. We're just amazed at what's happened.
You need to have in your life something inspirational, something that will lift you up and inspire you and awaken that higher nature within you. Now, I believe, of course, that that's one of the functions, certainly, of a church service, to lift you up and inspire you, and of the arts and so on. Now, you also need a path of service, something you do to help somebody, because in this world you're given as you give.
We were very busy sending out single books. Then they began wanting books to send to their, give to their relatives and their friends, and they began ordering more and more and more books until now many people order whole boxes of books.
I've been teaching my peace courses for about 8 or 9 years, and I've had 3,000 kids in my classes. So I've been using her book for a good many years.
I had reread the book, and there were 3 things that Peace Pilgrim thought was important, and that was your work and your area of service, which I had never given much thought to, and exercise. I didn't have an area of service. And I remembered there was a nursing home in town, and so I found myself offering to go in and do a music sing-along. I go up there twice a month. I've been doing it for a year, and that's my area of service.
I have a mission here. My purpose is to distribute Peace Pilgrim's book to as many congressmen and as many staff people who I feel confident will take the time and effort to read it.
Oh, I just give them the book and say, dip into this and see where it leads you. And some kids are ready for it, and some are not. And the teaching really gets you to understand that every flower blooms when it's ready.
I felt very, very inspired by Peace Pilgrim. I thought her message was really important. And I had this different ideas. At one point, I wrote to John and Nan, and I said, you know, what you should do is get the Steps book in Spanish.
It took me 3 years to do it. And in many cases, I didn't know how to translate something, yeah? And I always could feel Peace Program right here telling me that's the way. And and I said, yeah, all right, that's the way, keep going. So it was a fascinating process.
I had many jobs. We got George Dolnikowski asked us if we wanted to do the Russian Steps and book.
Naturally, I was very happy to see that Mirolюбивая страница, it's my translation, and that's what it is. That is peace-loving pilgrim. Yeah.
In Russia, there's a paper called Argumenti Facti, Arguments and Facts. And so Sergei had the bright idea of asking Argumenti Facti to announce to their 17 million readers that people could get free Russian language Peace Program materials. And after a few days after it hit the stands, we got a call from Sergei. I said, well, how many requests have you gotten from that newspaper? He said, so far we've gotten 1,100. So he called back like a few days later. I've got 5,000 now. And then he called back later and he had 10,000. And it actually topped off at 21,500. And then I asked them, I said, did you ever think about sending books to the prison libraries and the prison chaplains?
I first heard about Peace Pilgrim when I was still incarcerated in the Echo unit, and it was very close to when I was going through, I believe, phase 1 of Inner Peace.
The Inner Peace program that was put together basically took a lot of the Peace Pilgrim material, which was furnished to us about almost 4 years ago, I guess.
There was a simplicity that I admired. There was a directness, an honesty, and a courage to say the truth. And what this book helped me to do was to give me the most positive female role model I've ever come across.
I would say that it is probably one of the best programs we have going. There definitely was an impact on all of the people.
With this Inner Peace program, in the years since, I believe, 1989, when it first began, to my knowledge, not one inmate has been rearrested for any crime committed after learning Inner Peace. Not a single one. There's only one phrase that comes to mind when I think of what a summation of Peace Pilgrim's message is. The phrase that I hear is, you can do it too.
You can work for peace right where you are, in your own surroundings. You can be a peacemaker, of course, wherever you are. And every time you succeed in bringing harmony into any inharmonious situation, right where you are, you have made a contribution to the total peace picture. So I would say you begin working in your own life, and when you have enough peace there, you begin working in your own surroundings. Eventually, you see, enough of us will have found enough inner peace to affect for the better our institutions. And then the bettered institutions will in turn, through better example, affect for the better those who are still immature.
I think Steve was totally influenced by Peace Pilgrim, and everything else he read and studied built on those same principles. But I think it was his Bible, if you will, something he always went back to. And I think that the Peace Pilgrim really affected. I'm not sure the movement would have happened without the guidance Steve got from Peace Pilgrim, because that was what inspired him to do everything else he did.
What is missing in the practice of law for the vast majority of people is a sense that what they're doing contributes. The paradigm for mediating is that you're peacemakers. There's a quality of doing good in mediating, of being a source of healing. Think win-win or no deal, that that's a rule of interpersonal relationships. Peace Pilgrim said it's got to be beneficial to everybody or it won't last. Jesus said,
how did Steve Brochet find Peace Pilgrim? I have no idea, but I'm awfully glad he did.
This is not a new thought.
Because it is the foundation of what we do every day as mediators.
So he pulled out this little brochure. He said, you need this. You need to read this. This is everything you need to know. He used that phrase all the time. This is everything you need to know, and handed us a little Peace Program brochure.
I thought it was wonderful that Steve would hand out something like that, because that was really a pretty bold step in the dog-eat-dog litigation days that we were in the late 80s.
Only he could look at a group of tenacious trial lawyers and say, you've been greedy pigs. You sold out for winning and for money. And that's not enough to sustain a life.
Slowly but surely, as you start getting into it and understanding that there was another way to get something done other than beating someone to death at the courthouse. And then it's like a little light coming on one day saying, you know what, this is better.
We had just observed a mediation, my first mediation that I'd actually seen from start to finish, and I was highly relieved at what I saw, that the process was not involving manipulation of the truth or deception, which the trial process does.
And after 25,000 cases, we have a steady 80% success rate, regardless of who the mediator is. And that's important, because the miracle is not in the persona of the mediator, it's in the process. It is based on universal principles that Peace Pilgrim enunciated that were not original with her. And the basic underlying principle is that there is a spark of divine goodness in us all, and that there is a abiding desire to seek and achieve peace and harmony.
I'm not the same person today that I was 4 or 5 years ago. I've seen people who hadn't seen me all this period of time. They say, you've changed. You're different. And I think for the best. But that's as a result of finding peace.
The thing about Peace Pilgrim's message is it has a way of changing people's outlook in life and perspective in a way that I don't know of any other book that does it. And I believe that we can't even begin to know the effect that it's had. And that as time goes on, the respect and regard that she is given in our society is going to increase, and I think her influence will too.
Things have changed a good deal since 1953, but I will say one thing has not changed, and that is my peace message. It still remains, this is the way of peace. Overcome evil with good, and falsehood with truth, and hatred with love. That's still the message that I'm carrying after all these years. Well, you see, we haven't learned to live it yet.
Peace Pilgrim, do you think that this one little effort can make a difference?
I know that all good effort bears good fruit, and so I keep on making what good effort I can. I leave results in God's hands. They may not be manifest in my lifetime, but eventually they will be manifest.
The key word for our times is really practice. When we do that, wonderful things will happen within our lives and within our world. I want to wish you all peace.
Sing till I can sing.